Good evening, everybody, and we're here live in Coral Gables, Florida, on a marvelous Friday night. And I want to welcome all of you to what is going to be just a remarkable event. We at Books and Books live for nights like this, when we can celebrate the talents and brilliance of our very own local folks who have made names for themselves around the world. And as you know, for those of you who are sitting here, you see these lights, and that's because we're doing live streaming. So I want to welcome the audience that is on the internet and through the wires, and to let them know that they too, if they like, can order these books just by calling the number on your screen, and we will make sure that you get a signed copy, and we will send it to you free of charge. I'm not the book free of charge. The shipping will be free of charge. The book will actually cost something, but the shipping will be free of charge anywhere in the United States. Those of you in India, unfortunately, will have to be paying a little extra if you want a book. But it's really a very, very special night, not least of which is because I get the opportunity to introduce somebody who will be introducing our guests. And this person is someone that I've been so remarkably fond of for so many years now. Someone who's been a huge supporter of everything we do. I think she was maybe one of the first ones through our doors who said, you know, you ought to carry some architecture books. I think that Beth Dunlop is somebody who, if you really go back and really think about it, is someone who has helped define this city just about as much as anyone else writing. She's defined the architecture, she's defined the space, she's defined the kind of the spirit and the soul of what Miami really is through all of her writings. She had one of the very first books on Art Deco that sold more copies. I think it put my kids through preschool, that early book that she had. Since then, she's gone on to write too many books to even mention. Her most recent one is a book on Coconut Grove Cottages, which is a gorgeous, gorgeous book if you haven't seen it. She is right now the editor-in-chief of Modern Magazine, a marvelous magazine, and she's with us here tonight. Please give Beth Dunlop a warm, warm Books and Books welcome.
I think I was the first person through the door, and I'm so excited that we're live streaming. My last book came out about a year ago. My last book before this, which is really a book that I did in collaboration with and worked with Bill and Phyllis Taylor, whom I will get to in 1 second. And there was no live streaming, so this is a first for me. And when I thought about how to introduce Bill and Phyllis Taylor, I thought, I tried to think back to when I first met them, and I realized that I don't remember. I absolutely cannot remember a time when I didn't know them, and I know that is not possible because she's from New York, he's from Florida, and I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. So clearly we did not grow up together. And I want you to know that these two are one of a kind. There is no other couple like them. And we've been friends, we've been neighbors, we've parented our children together, a verb I hate, but we're both the parents of children who went to the, now young adults, who went to the same schools. And I wanted to add that both Jeremy, an architect, and Lauren, a filmmaker, are in the audience today, and I'm almost as proud of them as they are because they're such wonderful, wonderful young people. And we've been professional colleagues for the better part of, I think, 3 decades now, but we aren't that old, so it's impossible. I remember I was working on a story for the Herald, and I think it was one of those sort of horrid 10 people to watch for the future or something like that. And I'm thinking that someone said to me, you know, there's this guy who's been doing some really nice work down in the Keys, and you should take a look at him. And you know, I don't know, but I do know that Bill was in that story, and of that story, I do know that he's been one to watch ever since. And not long after that, and I'm sort of compressing history, Metropolitan Home called me and said, we want you to go do a story on this apartment on the beach. And it was Phyllis's, and it was on the cover of Metropolitan Home. And after that, another magazine called. So even though we were already friends and already colleagues, I got all of these know their work just because the editors would ring up and say, hey, there's this nice house in Key West, or this great apartment, or whatever it was. And I am Bill and I also, I might add, sat together on the Miami Beach Historic Preservation Board, and one thing that I am glad to know about both Bill and Phyllis Taylor is that they are diehard preservationists the way I am. So I would know this if you went to their office. Their office tells you an awful lot about them because you sit in their little conference room. Well, first of all, their office is a 1930s, I think 34, is that 38 beach cottage on Alton Road, and it's the cutest thing you ever saw, really. You go in, and what might have been a parlor at one point, or I don't know, a living room, a porch, is a kind of conference room cum library, and the walls are floor to ceiling, books about beautiful buildings, books about beautiful objects, books about beautiful furniture, books about beautiful places. And it's my hope that this book, Classic Florida Style, secures a comparable place in comparable libraries all over Miami and all over the country, because it deserves to be there. And as they talk, you'll see why, because they have really done more than their share in offering to us a large number of very beautiful homes, rooms, and places. And so without anything further, I'm going to give you I left the bios to you because I know that your story is a fun one. So I made this a little personal, but out of the depths of my heart. So without anything further, I'm going to give you Bill and Phyllis Taylor. Except there is something further. They're going to talk, and then we'll give you all a chance to ask some questions if you want, or to make some comments. And if there's a lull in the conversation, I'll ask them a question.
Thank you. And I really want to thank you, Beth, because you've been a great help in guiding us through this process. And you gave such a beautiful voice to our book, and such an honest voice. And you really are a friend and a Florida treasure. Thank you very much. You know, when I look at the cover of our book, I think, wow, that's a picture. But then I think of what it really took just to get to the point that the photographer could take a picture like this, and all the work and the efforts of the people who go into it. And so I have to really acknowledge, it all starts with our clients. They ignite something in us that inspires us to have an idea and to move it forward. And it's really all the staff that we have, a beautiful team of architects and designers who ignite that flame and to keep it moving on until it finally gets to the builders and the craftsmen and the artisans who really have to make it come to life and be something solid so that people have a home and have a place to live in. And then finally, someone like Monticelli Press comes along and recognizes this effort and recognizes this work. And we want to thank everyone and tell them just really how proud we are that they've made us look so good. We're not the only book on the shelves around here, though, in case you've noticed. There's so many phenomenal stories on these shelves. But we want to tell you a little story about Books and Books. When Taylor and I first opened our office, Lincoln Road was a pretty sleepy place at the time. There were maybe a gallery or two, a couple of artisans here and there, a Cuban restaurant, and there was Books and Books. And this was the days before the internet. You just couldn't Google something when you wanted to find out, you know, a pattern of carpeting or tile. And so it would be maybe about noon. One of us would stand up and say, "I'll be right back. Time to take a Books and Books break." And we would go off to this bookstore, and they have a beautiful table of books. They always let you look and browse and dream. And we'd always come back with either a book or a great idea. And we really want to thank Books and Books for being for us there then and being here for us now. Thank you, Books and Books.
And I'd like to just take a second to ask you all to work with me a little bit here. Those of you who know Phyllis and I know that we participate in a design seminar every year that takes place all over the world. And we've learned a lot during those design seminars, and we probably wouldn't be sitting here tonight with this book unless we had participated in them. And they always make you do like a mixer. You know, you have to hug the person next to you and that sort of thing. So I'm not going to make you do that tonight. But what I would really love you to do is if you would stand up for me. Everybody stand up. I'm going to tell you. Just hang on. And now would everybody who was not born in Florida please sit down? And would everybody whose parents were not born in Florida please sit down? Well, you can stand up.
Oh, mixed marriage.
Oh. And now, third and fourth generation Floridians, please sit down.
You got to get fifth generation
And now,
to sit down.
Yeah, I know. I'm waiting for everybody to sit. And now, fifth generation Floridians, please sit down. No, sorry. Yes, fifth sit. So who's left? Young man, what is your name?
Jeremy Taylor.
And yours, young lady?
I'm Lauren Taylor.
And the point of that really is that Florida is a very young place and a very special place. But growing up here as a fifth generation Floridian, I didn't know it was all that special. I mean, it was just home to me. But my mother was from Chicago, and one summer we went to visit my mother's family in Chicago. And the neighborhood kids received me like I was something special, like I was a little celebrity. And I didn't really get it, but then over time I spent the summer with them. I realized that somehow in their minds they thought I was this little adventurer that had somehow escaped the jaws of all the alligators and the crocodiles and the panthers and the snakes, and somehow I ended up with them on the shores of Lake Michigan. And ever after that, when I came home, I always saw Florida in a completely different light. It was never the same for me again. I always saw it as the exotic, beautiful, sunny place that it really is. And that takes me to this image. One of the first things that really struck me when I came home was the houses around me. And this house, this is not my great-grandfather's house, but my great-grandfather's house looked very similar to this. It was a whitewashed rancher, and it sat in the very middle of an orange grove. And it had a veranda that completely wrapped around it like this, and it was elevated off the ground like this. There were a couple of differences, though. Like, it was a really old house, so he had replaced a couple of these with real trees, tree branches. And off of the corner here, there was a sink, and the sink had a pump handle. I mean, there was no faucets or anything like that. When you wanted water, you pumped. And over the years, I've always returned back to the memory of this house. It doesn't exist any longer, but I've returned to the memory of it and tried to incorporate some of those things into almost all of my homes, because really everything that you needed to know about to build and to be comfortable in an environment like Florida is embodied in this house, this very simple house.
Okay, well, my family's hardly even second generation American, never mind Floridian. And I have a very different experience with falling in love with Florida. When I was a kid, we'd come down here on vacation. It was the time the family was together. And when we came down here from New York, I really couldn't process just how bright and white and how colorful it was all at the same time. And everything about it was fun. The beach was fun. The shells were fun. The beach towels had great colors. It was just such a lively place. And I think I really loved the souvenir shops, too. I mean, they had everything. Live alligators, stuffed alligators, chocolate alligators. I mean, what else could you want? And I think it's this element of fun and whimsy that has followed me through all my days. And everything that I do in my work has always had a little bit of this element in Florida that I bring along with me.
This is one of the first houses that appears in the book, and we want to share with you a little bit about it tonight. It's a perfect little Key West cottage,
Whoops.
and it's situated on a perfect little white sand beach on a perfect little private island just off Key West. But when our clients brought it to us, there was one little problem. There is absolutely no light inside the house. And as Beth has said, it was filled with gratuitous Tuscan arches. So this is what Taylor & Taylor did with it. That's the identical image and the identical pair of French doors down at the end of the hall. And to accomplish this, really what we did is I just pulled out a very dark internal stair and replaced it with this sweeping white stair, and then punched through the exterior wall, punched a beautiful little Palladian window. And the effect of that was really nothing more than just flooding the interior of that house with light. We had a couple other tricks too. I mean, that was plenty of light, but we wanted to do a little bit more. And the dark cabinet there is actually the refrigerator and the pantries. And we faced that with antique glass. And that really just absolutely, again, flooded the interior with light. We also did windows instead of backsplashes and just changed the whole demeanor of everything that you see there. You might have also noticed that we added a molding or two here and there.
Gratuitous, I'm sure.
Gratuitous moldings.
Where you've got light, you've got color. And there's nothing like celebrating color in Florida Light. And where you have light, you also have contrast if you don't care for color.
Oh, I'm sorry. The story of this house, the second house, is really the story of the water and the ocean. This is a brand new house that we built together in the Florida Keys. And I was given really an extraordinary piece of property to work with. It had water almost 360 degrees around it. And this is just a view from the backyard looking out to the, actually that's the Anglers Club off in the distance. And this image is looking north. If you looked right around the corner there, you'd see Turkey Point. But again, an absolutely spectacular lot. And this is the front of the house. And in almost all my houses, I always love to play the game of splaying the wings, of spreading the wings of a house. And it does, it's a very easy device, but it really does an amazing thing. Is when you spread the wings of the house, you're able to focus, even on a very narrow piece of property, focus on very different views across the board. And this house allowed me to do it 18 times. The living room looks out across the bay. The family room looks out across a canal. The master bedroom looks out on Pumpkin Key. This is the exterior of the house.
There's a room from every view except for this room. This is the entry foyer of the house. And rather than be able to see it all from the front door, Taylor made sure that there was an actual wall when you came in. And the stone walls would give it a sense of Florida, but you had to go around that wall in order to get your aha view. This is another shot of the entry foyer showing all of the formality of the stone. Whimsy is never too far away. And this is the aha view. And I really like showing this picture because I think, there used to be Florida rooms in Florida all the time, and they were jalousied or screened.
And this is really what's become, and this is how the Florida rooms have evolved in Florida. Doors open up, and we're able now, with the innovations in fabrics and furniture and outdoor carpets, to really be able to create formal spaces on the outside. This is the other side of the living room, and our clients really asked us to have the feeling that she wanted to have a formality at Palm Beach, but she also wanted this easy living of the Keys. And the way we accomplished that was really just to throw in a couple of the Lilly Pulitzer colors for her in the living room. And of course the blues that also reminded her of the water. We've always felt that dining rooms are spaces that are underused, and we like our clients to have to pass by their dining rooms when they're not using them, or have them opened up, or actually sometimes even have to walk through to get to another room. And it's also a great place to have a little bit of whimsy when no one is using the room. And in this room, we have got the oversized fruit. We've got the Hunt Sloanum, who just loves to paint birds and birds and birds and birds in a very happy way. And if you look close on the chairs, those little dots, we're really celebrating all the bugs of Florida in gold leaf. Our client not only loves to look at the water, but he loves to do water sports. So, I'm doing something.
It's good.
Okay. He really loves to do deep sea fishing, and so when I heard of this, I got in touch with Guy Harvey, and said, "Well, you know what? Maybe he'll paint a painting of maybe your favorite day out on the water." And so they got together and discussed it, all about the ballyhoo and the tuna and they had this painted for them, and I think it's called a Reef Cup Kind of Day.
We missed one. Go back.
I missed one?
Yeah, we missed a light. The kitchen.
Wasn't there?
But go ahead. Go ahead. Tatiana, we missed one.
When the University of Miami wanted to build a house for the president, Donna Shalala asked for three things. She asked that Liz Plater-Zyberk design the house. She asked that it be a LEED house and be environmental. And she asked that Phyllis Taylor take it from there. She's a wise lady. This was totally serendipitous, but I happened to get my accreditation and LEED probably about 2 months before they approached me on this project, so I was right in line to do it. And one of the things that really kind of worried me was everything was so granola, and how was I going to make a house that was going to look great for the future presidents and not have it look like it came out of a box of tree hugger material. And the first thing that I noticed is I had to have something formal. I had to have a hard surfacing material that I was going to be able to do quite a few things with it. But one of the LEED requirements is that the materials that you use in the house have to be sourced within 500 miles of the site. Well, we live in a really long state, and it's 447 miles long. So Cuba is 90 miles away, but it wasn't an option. So we really had to think about how we were going to overcome that. And the way we did it was to locate someone in town, a really great artisan, who would make us, out of Florida sand and seashells, tiles of varying colors that we were able to use on the walls and floors, inside, outside, throughout this project. This is just another little option we've done with the floors. In the dining room, the president likes to entertain in different ways, and sometimes the tables are put together as one long formal table, the way you would see in a normal residence. And at other times, she likes to do dinner parties where the tables are split up, and there might be 8 people at a table. She can seat, actually, I think about 32 very comfortably in this dining room. It was important that this house not just be a ceremonial house, but really be a true home for someone to live in with a family. And it's very difficult to try to do lighting when the tables are moving around all the time. And so we thought maybe we would do something where the whole entire ceiling was just a canopy of branches and light. And these fixtures were made completely from recycled aluminum cans. The plates on the wall are Picasso, but they're hanging on recycled vinyl. This is really my favorite story of the house. They were excavating for the swimming pool, and they uncovered a large area of coral rock. And no one was really too interested about doing anything about it. We had already designed the fireplace, and it was already going to be a wood fireplace. But when I found out about it, I knew that that was a lot closer even than the 2 miles they made the floor from, and I wanted that stone to go on that fireplace. And so finally, because I don't say no, that stone was taken and quarried out of the property and then carved and placed back. This is Donna's favorite room in her home. And she tells me that when she's in it, she feels like she's in a tree house. And the color scheme actually came just from the Spanish moss and the green that was right outside the window on this site. Another prerequisite that was Donna's is that she wanted to be able to read in every room in the house. And so I made sure that she had a lantern just about over every room, every seat in the room.
Wait. Go back. Please.
Uh-oh.
Can we go back?
Yeah, I pushed a bad button. Sorry.
Okay. I didn't want to miss this one because this is my favorite image in the entire book, and it's probably one of my favorite rooms. But the funny thing about it is I encountered it just like you guys did tonight. Phyllis was working with other architects on the house, architects outside of our office and architects inside of the office, but somehow I wasn't all that involved. And the day this was installed, I went out and took a look at it, and I loved it. And I sort of, you know, I'm usually involved, like what's the difference? Well, the difference was that Phyllis had used my favorite color in Donna's living room. But the other thing was I didn't have any of the backstory. Usually I know every single story that goes along with every piece of furniture. And we've had some pretty crazy stories over the years. One of those, we once had a chandelier delivered, and it was large enough that a family of 4 could have actually moved into it.
Well, evidently 72 inches is different than 7 feet 2 inches.
And then there's the old one where the upholstery is actually flipped around or turned upside down. That's, you know, I wouldn't say that happens a lot, but it has happened. I love this image. This next house really is about the story of Spain and its influences on Florida. And as we all know here in Miami, you know, Florida was discovered by the Spanish, and we have, you know, so many influences that come to us from South America and Spain and Cuba. And this was really my opportunity to explore that to a degree. My client, who is here tonight, asked me to do a Mediterranean house, and I was really, really excited to do it. I just wanted to back up a little bit and say that, again, growing up in Florida, I didn't know that much about Spain. I had never been there, but I grew up in Sarasota on the West Coast, and what runs along the side of the West Coast, the Gulf of Mexico. So I always, as a kid, imagined and dreamed of traveling to Mexico. And I always had visions of the Aztecs and the pyramids and the galleons and all of that. And of course, it's not, well, some of that's true, but not all of that's true. But I was always been enamored with Spain, and I got to sort of play that out in some of the following images. The house really is one room deep, and that's a very common thing in Europe and in Spain in particular. And what that really allows to happen is that light and breeze really can come in 8 hours a day on both sides of the house. The sun just goes over the house and illuminates the same room. The other thing that's, I think, a little unusual about this house is really very much like a Spanish or a Mexican hacienda. There's not a lot of detail. If this house had been a townhouse, there would have been carvings and there would have been stone. and there would have been things like that. But this house is all about just the rough textured stucco, the handmade barrel tile, and a few extra, really nice little details that just pick it out, like the green around the windows and the rusticated shutters. We're looking from the kitchen into the breakfast room, and you can see just the little hint of a barrel tile roof in the room. And again, this is something that comes from Mexico. You would see this in San Miguel de Allende, or you would see this even in Acapulco. But it's just really a beautiful and very subtle effect that just makes you feel that you're back in special places like that. The loggia, too, is a Mediterranean device. This loggia shades the living room, the dining room, the kitchen, and the family room. All of those rooms spill out into this, and this is beautifully shaded from the late afternoon sun. And also, we used a screen enclosure with a true wood supports that really protect it from all the critters that are out there. And this is on a beautiful lake, but there's a lot of critters out there. We have peacocks, and we have absolutely monster iguanas. So the least we could do is put a little screen out there.
This is Claire and Dan Marino's getaway in Kiawah Island called Passing Time. And Floridians, they need vacation homes too. It's nice to get away every once in a while. But it seems as though they always want to bring a little bit of Florida with them wherever they go. They kind of get used to the light and the colors that we have here. And this was an absolutely beautiful house. There was only one problem with it. It didn't really work for the Marinos because they're a large family. They like to get together. Sometimes there could be many as 30 of them in one room doing various activities, most of them watching a game probably. And what we did was we decided to enclose porches instead of open them. And there were some small rooms on this area that we also opened up. So basically we just took the whole first floor and said, it's a living room and you're really going to live in it. But in large spaces, it's really important to have some cozy areas that you can have an intimate conversation or feel as though you're just not in a hotel lobby. This is the bedroom, and it was really important to bring in the colors of Florida that they felt very comfortable with. But we usually have a problem in Florida of trying to take something a client wants that really doesn't fit and acclimate it to Florida. I was very sensitive to make sure that I didn't do that in the other direction. And so what I tried to use were little hints that really would harken back to colonial things from Charleston. And this toile that we used on the draperies is one. And I thought it was really important, instead of the palms of Florida, to take the palmetto palms that are just right off the property and incorporate that in the room. Many times people will approach Taylor and I and think that we're very opposite. No, opposites attract. And we really thought about it, and we don't think we're opposite. We kind of think we're kind of a yin-yang when it comes to Florida anyway. And Taylor, I kind of see, is the yin, he's at one with the place, and it's in his blood and in his heritage, and he understands the breeze, and he knows what it means when the moon's in a certain phase, and when the cows sit down, and
it's true. I do.
He really does. And then there's me on the other side, My view of Florida has really never changed. I think it's kind of kitsch and it's kind of fun, and it's what I celebrate about it. And so the two of us together, we think we make homes for people in spaces that belong here and settle in here very nicely and take advantage of all of the natural elements, but then have that little kick and fun and whimsy of the little girl who really never grew up and still loves that stuff. 1,000 people move to Florida every single day. It's a lot of people. It's a lot of people seeking our sunshine and our coasts and all that we have to offer. And what we realized with this book, and what we wanted to, the reason why we wanted to do this book, is really to share that, because not everybody can move here. And we're finding that we have something that we can export, that we can show the world how to brighten a room, and how to feel the breeze, and how to have the sunshine state of mind at any latitude.
Thank you.
I want to say that working with Bill and Phyllis on this book was a lot of fun. I did want to move into most of the houses, and
We did too.
yeah, I know it's one of those things, and I particularly like the house that is represented by the client who's in the audience. That's one of my very favorites, and so what I have some questions, but I'd like to throw it open to all of you first. If does anybody have a comment or a question or a thought? And if not, I'm going to start the conversation. And I'm going to go high and low, yin and yang, but I wanted to start with Bill. And you know, one of the things that strikes me about your work is that we see, sorry, I'm not talking into the mic. And we see in this, in South Florida and really all over the country, we see a lot of historicist houses that are really bad. They're clumsy, they're clunky, and I always look at yours and they're so elegant and so graceful, and it strikes me that this derives from your profound love of history and your ability to use a certain amount of restraint. But can you talk about that? I mean, you don't need to trash other people's work necessarily, but I think that, but you can. Feel free to say nasty things about McMansions. But how do you shun those cliches? Is it study? Is it?
I don't know if it's
drawing?
really. I don't know if it's really study so much. I think really, unfortunately, what happened in architecture schools really in the past, say, when I was in school, history was really breezed over. Everything was modernist. We were steeped in modernism, and that was wonderful back then. And modernism still exists, and there's spectacular things, being done all over the world today. But there's still a good body of people that really love classical style and classical architecture. And there was a time in there that is being taught again. I mean, that's a great deal of what the University of Miami is about, and they're doing a terrific job doing that. But years ago, that wasn't being taught. And I think probably what you're seeing out there is architects that never learned it.
Right. I think that what happened and what the University of Miami School of Architecture is so good at is teaching its students to draw, because when you draw, you see. And I know you draw, and but I also know that I think your reverence for history and your study, not just, I think you, in Miami in particular and in South Florida, what strikes me is that you took it back to the beginning, and you approach a project the way someone designing in Coral Gables in 1926 would have, with source material from Spain and Mexico and Spanish colonial times and Santa Barbara, which precedes us. And I think that's very, very interesting.
Well, it's absolutely true. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine a house until I walk the site, until I see the property, and I get a lay of the land and see where the prevailing winds are coming from and what the landscape is like and what the foliage is like. That really informs, I would say, easily 60% of what that house is ever going to become.
Mm-hmm. And in that same vein, I know, Phyllis, that you have clients who come in and say, I like turquoise. I like turquoise. I like that dress. But I was struck in the, and by the way, I just wanted to say that Donna Shalala, who has been a friend and a client to the Taylors and called our house today and talked to my husband, not me, so I'm presuming the message is pretty good, but she sent her regrets she couldn't be here tonight, but she's already bought several copies of the book and intends to buy several more. If you leave her any, but don't worry about that, because Mitchell will reorder. And so if you buy them all out, Mitchell will reorder, right? But she wanted to be here and could not, but, and so I just thought I would pass that on to you. But I was struck by, in looking at the Shalala, the President's House, the way you derived the colors almost organically from the outdoors and from kind of the sensibilities of Florida. There was in my exercise class the other morning, there was a discussion of, was that melon or was that mango? And, right, or was that coral? And which color, which Florida color was it? But how do you go about, your colors are so profound and so strong. And is there a secret that you can share?
Well, I think color is such a subjective thing that you really take most of your clues from your clients. And really, for me, the big step is trying to get clients to actually embrace a color. And I think there's a great fear of color. And it seems as though I have to say, you know what? It's not permanent. Don't put it on something permanent. You don't have to marry it. You know, just relax about it. I think there's a great anxiety for it. For me, I honestly think that I'm born. That's the way some people have a great ear for music. I don't think I see color the same as other people. I think it's such an exciting thing for me that I just love them. I mean, they make me happy. I think they're a great way when you have a budget and you want to change your room. It's color. It doesn't cost any more. Just do it. But I do think I really have to, when doing residential work, I really have to follow the lead for people the colors that they feel comfortable with. More so, I think someday when I'm such an artiste and people will come to me and say, you do whatever you want. But so far that hasn't happened.
You know, it strikes me, though, that you both are artistes in a way, but one thing that we all like about you and your clients like about you so much is that you never come into a project from a position of arrogance. You come in from a position where you have so much to learn from your clients and from the site and from the architecture and from what you're going to put in it. And I wanted to ask two questions in sequence. And the first was of Bill, because it strikes me that a lot of architects doing some of the gazillion-dollar houses that are in your in your oeuvre would not work with stucco, a material I love. But do you have favorite? I think you like to work with the historic materials, the materials that have been time tested here.
Absolutely. I mean, I love to work with all materials. There's not a single material that I don't love, and I like to work with those that are more indigenous to Florida than others. And we have some great ones here. Pecky cypress. It's an absolutely beautiful, beautiful wood. You can't use it for everything. It's got holes in it, but it's absolutely beautiful. And it doesn't exist really anywhere else on Earth. And of course, the Florida keystone. There's nothing like that anywhere else, where you see the coral heads in the walkways and in the walls. And that the foyer that Phyllis did in Key Largo is just the most amazing example of that. And everybody tries to duplicate it. You know, people make tile that looks like it and concrete that sort of looks like it. And they try and try and try and try, but nothing comes close to the real thing. And but in my houses, what I really always try and do, you don't have to slather the whole place with it. It's always better to use a little bit of a real thing than a lot of something that's not real.
That's a really good point, because that small amount, it's like jewelry.
Jewelry. Yeah.
It's like jewelry. Now, Phyllis, I know this is kind of a loaded question, because I've gotten to go shopping with Phyllis in a number of places, not just here, but Brooklyn and little tiny towns in southwestern Ontario. And so I've seen her at work, but I can only say that she is an amazing shopper. And when I first began to understand this was when I went with her to see an earlier Dan Marino house. And I'd say, where'd you get this? And she'd say, and this was Dan Marino, and he'd just gotten his 87,000th football award, and I mean he was like the most famous athlete in America at the time. And she'd say, "Oh, well, I got this at a thrift shop," and I'm thinking, "And you put it in Dan Marino's house?" But you know, it's just so interesting to me about where you find things and how you find them. And do you have any tricks of the trade, or do you want to talk about how you approach finding the objects that you fill your houses with? This is the subject of a whole other book, by the way.
Well, maybe this is a little mystical, but I really think that objects find me. And sometimes I'm looking for something specific and I'll never find it. So there's no point in even doing that. But I think that because I really don't have the sense of history and correctness that Taylor has, and everything's a little wabi-sabi about like which period this might be and which period that might be, I just really follow my instincts. And I know when something's just right. I know when it's going to look good. I know when it's going to fill the space and give it something that it needs. I do a lot of shopping, it's true, because when our houses are in different places, you know, I'll shop on the internet, I'll shop when I'm traveling in Europe. But I like to shop locally, right around the neighborhood of where the house is, because I kind of feel as though if there's something in the neighborhood that came from far away and found itself back to this place, it's going to be right for this house. And that really is, it sounds a little bit romantic, but it's truly how I feel.
There's a wonderful anecdote speaking of finding something in the neighborhood, about Dan Marino's house and the chest you found in Charleston. When you went to the antique shop and the was closing, can you tell that story? Or I think
They were the ones with the footballs in Kiowa.
The pair of
And the store was sold out.
Well, those aren't chests.
See, I know the story.
That's why.
That one I know.
Threw me off. I'm thinking chest, like a Bargueno type of thing, but that's not what we're talking about. There was a store in Charleston that Taylor and I had visited, maybe it was about 10 years ago when we were traveling. And it was loaded with antiques. I have never been in a place that there were so many and they were stacked so high that you couldn't even back up far enough from one to even tell what it looked like. If you wanted a snooker table, they literally had hundreds of them piled up everywhere. I mean, you almost felt really like you were in England. And I had forgotten about it and gone my way. And now, 10 years later, I'm doing a job in Kiowa, and I think, Taylor, and he has a great sense of direction and memory about things. Where was that place? Where were we? And he told me exactly where it was. And he said, you go down this road and you... So Claire and I head out. We're going to go find this place, only it was extremely sad because I guess there was hard times, or antiques weren't, the recession had come and antiques weren't very popular in that area, or people couldn't afford them, and I don't know what happened. But there was a huge sign outside and it said, last day of sale. Closing sale. And so Claire and I looked at each other and said, what the heck, we're here. And we pull in and we went into this store and there really weren't any antiques left. It was all kind of weird stuff that maybe was made in India to look like an antique, and it was pretty empty. And I kept thinking that I can't believe this was the place that had all this stuff stacked everywhere. And I turned a corner and there were a pair of beautiful pine china cabinets that we were looking for so that we could put Dan's trophies behind a locked case when he wasn't in residence. And we both looked at each other and said, this cannot be happening. And of course, we bought them on the spot, but it was the last thing the store had to sell, and they sold them to us.
And you'll see them in the book.
And you'll see them in the book. You said maybe it was a little too zen, but I think objects do find you. And we're going to wrap this up, but I will renew my offer for one or two questions if anybody has one. And yes, good.
I'm curious. You've talked a lot about this beautiful Florida style and how you see Florida over the years and how things have changed and how you see it and how they haven't. And same thing with architecture. And I'm just wondering, maybe this is a good closing question. How do you see Florida style sort of, where is it going from here on out, and what do you see as the anchors that will really keep it as, in a sense, what it is, this classic Florida style? How will it evolve, and what are the things that will really anchor it?
The question was, where do we go from here? How will Florida, in this book, which I know you will all enjoy when you read it tonight after you've bought it and they've signed it, you'll see some really prime examples of ways in which the ideas that are so central to life in Florida can be taken and made into something that is actually very beautiful and luxurious and glamorous, but also is exportable, as you can see from the last house, which is in South Carolina. So where do we go from here? How does Florida style evolve? What happens next? And is there a direction? Do you foresee the future? And do you think that?
I don't really see a huge trend, but I see really a bit of a trend, because what's happening, at least in South Florida, I would say primarily in South Florida, is we have so many people coming and moving here from all over the world. And most of those people are coming from the old world, from Europe and from France and Spain and everywhere. And they have all of the historic things there. And I think when they come here, they're looking for something fresh and something different and something modern. So there is, in residential work anyway, there is a very big movement, and things are very much moving in the modern direction, away from the traditional.
Yes.
Bill, with your interest in history, do you actively incorporate the golden mean in your architecture, the divine proportion?
Well, that's a really interesting question.
Oh, repeat the question. Do you, with his interest in history, does he automatically incorporate the golden mean into his work?
I think absolutely I do. And it's funny because when I had to, decide upon, when I was in college and going to graduate school, when I had to decide upon what I was going to, write about in graduate school, I went to all my professors, and that was something I wanted to study, and in depth, were proportions and the golden mean and all of that, and I was totally discouraged from doing that. And it was just something back in those days that wasn't studied and wasn't applied. And I'm not sure I ever really did tackle it and did study it. But I do think that there's something that you're born with. You either have a sense of that, a sense of proportion, and a sense of place. I couldn't begin to explain it. Phyllis and I talk about this very often. And I think it's just something that certain people are born with.
I want to thank you all for coming. Bill and Phyllis will sign their book.
Yes, thank you all. Let's thank them one more time. They were phenomenal. And I'd like to thank Beth Dunlap as well for being a great host tonight. So as you can tell, I think, from everything going on, that we have a lot. The night is just young. So we have music outside in the courtyard. We have a marvelous reception, which will be on the other side. And we have plenty of books of the Taylors for you to purchase. So please, just don't sleep tonight and stay here all night. Thank you all for coming. I thank you for being here.
Thank you,
as well.
everybody.
We'll see you.